Okay, thanks for watching. Okay, today in this video, I want to talk directly about the uncomfortable questions surrounding the attack on the Capitol of January 6th, 2021. Okay. All right. I realize this is a big issue, okay, because it's very serious. Okay. This wasn't an attack on some military base in Kansas or like this wasn't an attack on some city hall in Atlanta or Chicago. This was an attack on the U.S. Capitol. Okay, this was a big deal. I mean, there's no other way around it. Okay. On the other hand, there was some theater. There was a theatrical aspect to this and a political aspect to this. So um, and also, this comes in the wake of a couple of years, I think, or at least a year of protesting going on, around the George Floyd kind of thing, and so the country had already had sort of a period of protesting going on. What happened in Portland, for example, Portland really was almost I don't know, how would you say, like the downtown area of Portland was basically under siege for like weeks and months, which I don't know. I mean, a lot's been going on in the U.S. So it's not like we're going to look at the Capitol attack as being like an isolated incident. Okay, it comes with context. Okay, but what I want to focus on here is basically the difficult question. Okay, see, I'm a person where I really think that a lot of this using criminal prosecution as a political tool. Okay, like I'm not really into that. I don't like Donald Trump at all. Okay, I don't like him. Okay, but I don't like the country using the device, the tool of political prosecution to do what really should be done in just the purely political space. If you really want to beat Donald Trump, if you really don't want to see him, coming up through in the elections and stuff, well, then you have to primary him or you have to beat him in the election. It's let politics do the work. Um, and I realize, there are different points of view, but I just think that what kind of country would we become if we descended into using criminal prosecution as sort of like an auxiliary to just basic politics. And also, to remember, if you prosecute someone and don't give them their fair opportunity or fair opportunity, let's not use words like fairness. Okay, let's get beyond that. I mean, if you don't allow a person who has a lot of following like Donald Trump, people love him. So if you don't give him an unmitigated opportunity to just go through the political process, the election process, his followers are going to be very upset by that. Okay, and so you risk producing worse problems. Okay, because it is, you have to remember, Donald Trump is not an individual. He represents people that follow him. Okay, so when you get to that level of politics, you got to be really careful not to personalize too much. You have to sort of remember that Donald Trump is not just an individual. He represents people. Okay, so you have to be really careful about, I think, as much as possible, allowing the political process, the elections process, letting that govern, what happens to Donald Trump, and not taking him out, or not sort of like not injuring his ability to participate in the election process, because he does have a big following, and there could be like a political backfire if you try too hard to use, let's say, other tools to get Donald Trump out of the picture, basically. So anyway, the bottom line is, I know this is a big deal. And I also realize, let me just say right off the bat, I realize that Donald Trump, if he were not an ex-president, okay, if he were not a president at the time of the attack on the Capitol, he would definitely be indictable for inciting a riot, for inciting an attack on government property, for possibly insurrection. I don't know. We can get into that, but basically, if it was just Steve Bannon and Roger Stone and Corey Lewandowski, if they were the only people doing that, you know I would see. I understand. I understand anybody who directed that attack was probably doing something very illegal. Okay, there's no question about it. Okay, so like, it's not like I don't understand the criminal charges that are presently pending against Donald Trump. The latest criminal charges, but again, as guilty as he may be, I still think you have to remember that presidents can't go to jail. I explained that in another video. I mean, sorry, presidents cannot go to jail; they just can't. Um, And I just think that the dynamics change, and the considerations change when you're dealing with somebody who is, in a sense, sort of a public official. He represents people. He's a politician. I think that you just have to be careful, because you're getting into politics. So, but anyway, let's analyze what happened on January 6th. Like, how do I look at the January 6th attack on the Capitol? Okay. Now, first of all, let me start by saying I'm not happy about any attack on the Capitol. I did not like it. I thought it was disgusting. I thought it was using a spectacle theater. It was like using the Capitol as a way to do theater. You know, so like I'm really turned off at how you could desecrate a large government building like that, and a symbol. It's a symbol. You could desecrate a symbol like that, but just for theatrical purposes. That really bothered me. Okay, because that's just kind of that's kind of like not respecting. That's not respecting, our symbols of the government, basically. So I was personally upset by it, but let's get into try to understand what was going on. You know, I mean, at least try to, because I'm not really sympathetic to the right wing. I'm no right winger. And believe me, like I wouldn't last 3 minutes with right wing people. They wouldn't like me. I wouldn't like them. But I try to be realistic, because this is America. This is our country. This is our history. And as divided as we are, just like in the Civil War, and believe me, today we are living the Civil War. A lot of the spirits of the Civil War are alive today. So regardless of how divided we feel, okay, we are living the American history today. Okay, we are living American history today, and I think that however we may fall on the spectrum, wherever we may fall on the different sides of this warfare, this political warfare of today, I still think it's very important that we just take a fair look at what's happening. Just try to see what's happening. So basically, the way I look at the January 6th situation, okay, the way I look at it is there's always been, between the Democrats and the Republican, major chess playing, major kind of behind the scenes manipulation about how different districts in the country, how they get gerrymandered, how we deal with the demographics, because neither party has overwhelming advantages. Okay. For example, like say the Republican Party, if it was just up to just a straight popular vote, okay, they would have a lot of trouble winning in a lot of parts of the country. Okay. Because basically the country is very divided. Okay. And so the big problem for the Republicans has always been getting too many black people, getting too many poor people, getting too many disabled people to be voting. In other words, for Republicans, it's always been an advantage, like for the last 40 years or so, to basically try to suppress how easy it is to get registered to vote. Okay, because if you get too many, and worse, if they would allow people with a criminal record to vote, and that's been a big problem in Florida, but if it was just unmitigatedly easy for people with a criminal record to vote, that would really hurt the Republicans. Okay. So the Republicans already know that for them to have even a survival, they have to really manage how easy it is to be able to register to vote. Okay, that helps them. Okay, and they know that it's been a big thing going on for decades, And granted, the Democrats they also know that they have to do gerrymandering also, and they also have to really in close races, like say Georgia. Like Georgia, especially, that was a big state, and in other states that have big urban populations. Basically, Democrats know that in close races, okay, they need to get as many black people, as many kind of, I don't know how to say it. They need to get as many also people that just aren't really inclined to register to vote, people that might have problems with their ID cards, people that are disabled. You know what I mean? They have to really harvest votes to win certain elections. Okay, so there's a lot of behind the scenes engineering that goes on to kind of get little advantages, because neither party has an overwhelming advantage in certain key areas. Okay, so this is stuff that's been going on behind the scenes, And Donald Trump, he focuses on what he sees as the dirty games on the Democrat side, but the Republicans also play their dirty games. They gerrymander the hell. They do a lot of lobbying to limit how easy it is to get to vote. So I mean, you could debate this to the end of the day, but neither party has an overwhelming advantage in at least in certain key areas. I mean, yeah, there are certain areas that are just completely red states. Other areas are completely blue states. But in certain key areas, and I'm thinking like Georgia, I'm thinking like I think even North Carolina, I think like Pennsylvania, because Pennsylvania has a big like red state, kind of rural aspect to it. But then Pennsylvania also has kind of like the Philadelphia area, which is it's more of an urban kind of thing. So there's a lot of engineering that goes behind the scenes into how each party can basically stay in the race. Especially especially we're talking about areas where it's kind of a close call. And so unashamedly, the Democrats behind the scenes, anybody they can get to register to vote in certain areas, they'll basically do everything possible to get as many people registered. And and then there's the question, well, if you have problems with your ID cards, or if it's hard to establish identity of some people, there's a lot of politics behind how easy it should be to get registered to vote, whether you should have an ID card or present an ID card to vote. And then finally, the big deal in the 2020 election was the massive mail-in voting, massive campaign to do mail-in voting. And so basically, Trump could see beforehand, he could see that there's a lot of politics around the pandemic. Okay. And because people were really afraid, and maybe in some cases it wasn't advisable for some people to get out in public, even wearing a mask, but to be in a really public place. There was a lot of question about how they should really increase the use of mail-in voting and, not voting in person, basically. And so I think that the Republicans understood that for whatever reason, demographically, this was actually going to favor the Democrats. Okay. Now, I don't know the exact, the nerdy statistics and mathematics behind it, but, for whatever reason, I think the best way that I understood it was that Republicans understood that as a demographic, Democrats tended to be more scared of the virus. Okay. And as a demographic, I think Republicans were sort of more into like, I'm not scared of the virus. It's just a flu, kind of minimizing the virus, the COVID virus. Okay. So I think that all in all, I think when they did their mathematics and they did their they actually put the statistics on it, the demographics. I think it was pretty clear that that the pandemic was going to suppress the Democrat vote if people had to vote in person. Okay. And so the idea was that if you could really ramp up the mail-in voting, that was going to really favor the Democrats, basically. Okay, just as a demographic, because there were politics around the pandemic, and I think as a demographic, I think Democrats were more afraid of the virus, more observant of mask wearing, more less inclined to go in public and vote, as opposed to mail-in voting. So this is kind of like the backdrop to the election, and I think Donald Trump realized that if the Democrats were successful in getting a lot of mail-in voting promoted, okay, that basically the Republicans could see that would really threaten the election. Okay, and so what do I think Donald Trump really felt? Okay, I think Donald Trump, he knows that there's politics on both sides. He knows there's engineering on both sides around, managing demographics and managing who gets to vote. He understands that. There's a part of him that's cynical, but there's also a part of him that is a stone cold competitor. Okay. And when you're a competitor, you only focus on the fouls of the other team and you don't talk about your fouls. It's like basketball. I could foul all day long, but when someone fouls me, I'm going to be like harassing the ref. Hey, that guy pushed me, whatever. It's like, so Donald Trump is a competitor. All right. And so he's not going to think about all the ways that he and his party also manage and engineer, the demographics around voting. He's going to focus on what the Democrats are doing. Okay. And so I think basically as a competitor, I think Donald Trump understood that the Democrats were going to focus on, the mail-in voting as a major, major leverage to really get advantage in certain areas like Pennsylvania, Georgia. I think Pennsylvania and Georgia were like really, really important states, you know, maybe to a lesser degree Arizona, but they were going to really focus on this mail-in voting. And also Michigan, ooh, that's an important state. So basically Michigan, Arizona, Pennsylvania, and Georgia, those are like, wow. The, if those states had gone the other way, Donald Trump would be president. Okay. So basically, that was very serious, and I think the Republicans were smart enough to know that if the Democrats used the mail-in voting, and if they really got a lot of, let's say, undesirable people, you know, registered to vote, people that would never vote by themselves, you know, that would really just end the race, you know, and they could see that from miles away. They could see that months in advance. Okay, so basically, you know, Trump's a competitor and he's a fighter. He's a fighter, and so basically, he's like, you know, that's going to be bullshit. Basically, you know, I'm calling bullshit, and so in his poetic way of speaking, he's going to say, well, that's fraud. Okay, but then he knows that that's not really fraud technically. Okay, he knows that's not fraud technically. So what he's going to do is he's going to create a big story around fraud, and then later he'll get his fancy lawyers to come up with some bullshit explanation that may not be exactly that, but to justify him saying fraud. So Trump Trump uses a lot of hyperbole. He is a politician. He knows the power, the poetic power of hyperbole. Okay, and how you justify your hyperbole, well, that's just for the nerds. You know, they can come up with some bullshit to justify it, but I'm going for the poetic soul of the country. Okay, so Trump understands that hyperbole goes to the soul. Okay, and that you're going to get some bean counter out there to cash out, you know, some technical argument, but what he's going for the soul, and he's willing to accept the risk of that. Okay, he knows that it's a dirty game, and he knows that, you know, using like a legal microscope, it might not cash out, but he still prefers the hyperbolic, you know, mode of the poetic mode of hyperbole. That's his way of relating to the people, and he's willing to pay the price for that. In other words, he knows that that might not cash out under a microscope, and it might not cash out technically, but he likes to relate to people on the poetic level. Okay, so basically, you know, I think Trump kind of understands that technically, all the games that go on behind the scenes between the Democrats and the Republicans, how they manage the demographics. Okay, he knows that that's not necessarily fraud, but I think on a poetic level, it's fraud. Okay, so it's kind of like poetically, it's like that's not right, that's bullshit, and so he says fraud, and he's willing to sort of blend poetry and poetic reality with actual technical reality, and he understands there's a price to pay, and that under a microscope it might not really cash out, but he prefers the poetry because that's a stronger way to relate to the public. Okay, and that's just his way of doing things, and he thinks there's more power in it. Okay, if you just operate through the technical microscope, he knows there's no power. Okay, there's no poetic power. Okay, so basically, I believe, now I can't prove this, but I'm going to tell you what I think. Okay, I think the people that are really behind kind of the Trump movement, they're kind of a constellation of people. It's kind of like Roger Stone, kind of like Steve Bannon, kind of like Corey Lewandowski. Okay, you guys, you want to look into somebody, go check out Corey Lewandowski. Okay, these are people that are very influential. These are like the top high priests, kind of like major influencers, kind of in this, like, I don't want to say Tea Party, but it's kind of like this alt-right, kind of like MAGA, kind of like modern populist right wing, whatever you want to call it. The people you want to look at are people like Roger Stone, Steve Bannon, and Corey Lewandowski. Okay, people like that. And then there's other people around them, but those are like three major figures. These are like top influencers. Okay, and basically, I think that they sort of, their way of looking at the world, they understand that the way you really move politics is at the poetic, hyperbolic level. Okay, and since they know that nowadays you can't have like a real revolution. Okay, nobody can just go out and just like literally with machine guns, you know, just create a revolution. You can't do that. So they believe, especially Roger Stone, these people believe in like clown show shaking down the world, like clown show. Like, you're going to do things that are kind of on a theatrical level, okay? But in the theatrical level, you're going to bring out all the spirits of revolution, okay? So they want to bring out the spirit of revolution, but they want to do it through a clown show, theatrical clown show, okay? So basically, they just want to raise the temperature of the soul without having to do it physically. Okay, so they want a warfare. They want the civil war, but they want it at the soul level, not physically. So they play around the edges, and they love doing that. And it's kind of like clown show. It's like a clown show theater, you know. But they really want to shake it up, and they want to bring out the spirit of this country is bullshit. There's a lot of bullshit going on in this country, and they want to shake it down with the energy of like street fighting, okay, without having necessarily all the street fights. So they're really operating on the soul level, kind of like street fighting energy, you know. And it sort of comes across as a clown show, and they kind of play with the truth, and they're not afraid to lie a little bit, because their interest is in the shakedown. They want to shake down the bullshit, okay, and they're willing to pay the price of not being technically accurate under the microscope of everything they say, because they're playing in the hyperbole world. And they also know the hyperbole pisses off the Democrats, because they'll say things that are almost racist. They'll say things that are almost like blasphemy of like democratic ideals, and they'll have kind of like a rudeness. And they love seeing how the Democrats get so upset, because it's like they're shaking up the beehive. They're shaking the tree. You know what I mean? So that's kind of the philosophy, I think, behind their revolutionary politics. Because as far as they're concerned, this country is full of shit. This country has a lot of stuff that's bullshit, you know, and they just want to shake the tree and shake the tree and shake the tree, because they think that that's the way to kind of purge the spirits and sort of have like a war, a civil war, without actually having a civil war. So it's kind of like on a spiritual level, they want to have a civil war. Okay. So I think basically what was happening towards the end of 2020 was the election year. Okay. And they could see they were going to lose. They could see the combination of the pandemic and the combination of using a lot of mail-in voting. Okay. That was going to really overrepresent the Democrats as far as like the voter participation. Okay, because normally in the United States, you have a major problem with voter participation. Usually, up to even half of people who could vote usually don't actually vote. So, with the artificial overrepresentation of Democrats because of all this mail-in voting and the campaign around mail-in voting, the voter participation figures were going to really be dangerous, I think, for the Republicans. Okay, so they could see it coming a mile away, and so months before you ever heard anybody talk about this, okay, they already had a plan, basically, because Steve Bannon talked about it. He said that Trump. He said privately to somebody, I can't remember who he talked to, but he said privately to somebody that, you know, hey, if Trump loses this election, he already has a plan. He's going to say it was fraud, and he's going to he's going to shake the tree, you know, because they're going to play their politics, you know. So this plan was already in place months in advance of the election, that they could see it coming. And basically the idea is we're going to say fraud, and we'll let some bullshit lawyers come up with a argument as to why it was fraud. But basically, in our soul, we know that it was bullshit what the Democrats are doing with the mail-in voting and using the pandemic, and how they're engineering around the pandemic to get heavy voter participation, like artificially increase their voter participation. And but knowing that technically under the microscope, that's not really fraud. Okay, so it's kind of like using that hyperbole, but knowing that on some soul level there is some truth to it. Okay, and basically they're going to go with that, and that's going to be their game plan, and they're going to fight to the end, and they're going to create almost like the appearance of a revolution, almost the appearance of of an insurrection, because that's the politics they like to play. They like to play that right at the edge of a civil war kind of thing. You know, they love it because it pisses people off, and that's just the way they do their politics. They like that. They want the country to be in flames, basically, you know. So that's pretty much how the January 6th got started. You know, it was a game plan set in place well in advance, and basically they just took it to the limit. You know, they have that feeling like people who play poker. A good poker player knows how to play all the way to the end of the hand. You know, where you pretend you bluff all the way to the end. Okay, so it's kind of like the bluff psychology. You know, where they like to hold their brinksmanship real high and they like to raise the stakes all the way to the end of the hand. And even after they lose, you know, even after Trump loses the hand, he still acts as though he had a bluff, you know. And that's just his poker style. He's a very aggressive player, you know, and that's just the way he does his politics. So no, I don't think that there was technically any fraud in the election. I don't think Trump believes there was technically any fraud in the election, but I think on a hyperbolic, poetic level, I think he's taking the position that it was fraud what the Democrats did with their demographic engineering around the pandemic. Okay, and I think he's going to stand by that. Okay, because that's his hyperbolic, poetic way of seeing things, and that's his competitor's position. Okay, so basically, that's my analysis of how the Capitol attack came about, and then finally, actually inciting it. Okay, on the very day of the Capitol attack, Trump gave a speech to those supporters out there, and he basically, between the lines, suggested that they're going to peacefully go and they're going to actually go right up to the Capitol because Trump, he plays everything to the limit. He plays his poker all the way to the end because that's the way he plays poker. Okay. So basically, it's a bluff, but it's a bluff all the way. Okay. And he knows this political theater. He knows it's going to cost him. He knew in advance he'd have to pay lawyers for years and years, but he plays his game all the way to the end because that's how he plays. Okay. And he probably gambling and gambling that, yeah, it's going to cost him a lot, but he's going to get so much support and people are going to know that he's for real and he believes and he fights. Okay. And even when under the microscope it's debatable, he still fights all the way for his position. Okay. And so his supporters believe that he's real, and so if he were to become president, he'll deal with the criminal charges. He'll deal with the fact that he may be a felon or, he may have pending criminal actions. But he for now, he just wants to, gather his supporters, and he's willing to take he's willing to take the he's willing to assume the risk of major, major political prosecution, I would say criminal prosecution. And in a sense, he also understands that no matter how expensive it is to pay his lawyers, and no matter how expensive it is to actually defend himself in all these criminal proceedings, he knows that in a weird way, he becomes a folk hero. Okay. And so he's playing on the poetic level, not the microscopic technical level. Okay. And he accepts all the microscopic technical demerits against him. He accepts all the risk, the technical legal risk against him, but he knows he's going to cash in much more on the poetic loyalty that because he's becoming a true folk hero who has the balls to actually put himself out and get indicted and receive all those criminal charges. So he puts himself like right in the target, and so like people at the poetic level see that he has more balls, that he is more courageous, that he's willing to actually fight to the end and put himself at risk, But it's kind of funny because he is also very smart, and he knows that because he's an ex-president, he can't really go to jail. So it is just theater. You see what I'm saying? And this is why I'm talking about, I keep repeating why we don't want to play into Trump's strategy, because we're actually playing into his strategy. Okay. I think he knows, and I think even the Democrats know, that the high level Democrats know, the people that are actually playing the chess here, I think they know that you can't actually put a president into prison. It's just legally you can't do it. Okay. And legally, when you become a president for the rest of your life, you're in prison anyway. You know what I'm saying? They have no freedom. So basically, I think Trump, he puts himself like in total jeopardy, but I think he also knows it's very limited what they can actually do to him. But he knows that poetically and as a folk hero, okay, he's actually going to cash in more, and this is going to make him more controversial. But he loves being controversial. That's part of his secret sauce. Okay, so in the end, what's happening is that he looks like he has more balls and that he's more for real. Okay, so he seems like a more legitimate person, and he becomes a folk hero. Whereas Biden, the most you can say is that some marketing expert, puts glasses on him and says, "Oh, this is Dark Brandon" or something. But the bottom line is that, sorry, Trump is the folk hero and Biden is not. So I think if you look at it honestly, I think Trump really has an advantage in all this. Now I say this, I don't like Trump. Okay, I really don't. But I'm just trying to be honest about what really happened with the attack on the Capitol and how that really is going to affect Trump. And I hope that the way I explain this kind of explains and justifies why I think it's just not right for us to be playing into his hand and using all these government resources to bring all these criminal charges against Trump, because really we're just playing right into what he wants, and it's like it's his reality TV show in the end. He's the one owning this reality TV show. We're all just characters in his reality TV show. So that's my analysis of January 6th, and thanks for watching.